At 2:45 p.m. local time in the Eastern Pacific, the sea is open, visibility is clear, and inside the Combat Information Center, everything begins like any other watch. The radar sweeps in silence, returns stay steady, and nothing seems out of place. USS Sampson is moving along a routine patrol route through a well-known transit corridor. No tension, no alarms, just disciplined scanning across a vast stretch of ocean. Then one contact changes speed. At first, it is subtle. A small surface return with a low profile, skimming close to the wavetops. But its acceleration does not resemble normal commercial traffic. It is not gradual. It jumps from idle to full power in seconds. The radar operator marks it immediately. Long range, stable bearing, speed rising fast. Within moments, more signs begin to line up. No AIS signal, no registered call sign, no answer to the first bridge-to-bridge hails. This is not just a fast-moving contact, it is moving with purpose, straight through a corridor known for long-range smuggling routes. Inside CIC, the atmosphere changes. Screens refresh, sensors narrow their focus. Electro-optical systems begin sliding toward the vessel's projected path. Then the visual confirmation comes in. On the forward camera feed, dark objects start flying off the stern. One after another, compact packages skip across the surface before vanishing beneath the swell. That is not fuel. That is not gear. That is cargo being thrown overboard. For half a second, the room goes quiet. Not from uncertainty, from recognition. Everyone there has seen this profile before. Low freeboard, narrow hull, multiple high-output outboard engines. A textbook go-fast boat built for one purpose and one purpose only. The vessel keeps accelerating, carving a sharp white wake across the blue water. It is trying to outrun detection. It is trying to outrun authority. But that moment has already passed. On the bridge, the commanding officer does not need to raise his voice. The evidence is already on the screen. Stateless vessel, no compliance, active disposal of contraband, clear signs of illicit trafficking in international waters. This is no longer passive observation. This is now an interdiction. The order comes down calmly and clearly. Set condition 3. Prepare the helo. Across the ship, the response is immediate. Doors seal, stations are manned. The destroyer does not need to turn sharply or sprint ahead. Its role now is command, control, and total management of the scene. On the flight deck, the helicopter crew is already in motion. Rotors unfold, fuel lines disconnect, systems spool up. No one rushes, no movement is wasted. This is repetition turned into instinct. Back in CIC, the radar track is now solid. Speed confirmed, heading confirmed. The vessel is running flat out, but the math is already against it. Out here, the open ocean provides no cover, no terrain, no place to disappear. Another burst of debris splashes into the sea behind the boat. More cargo, this time dumped faster, more carelessly. That tells its own story. They know they have been seen. They are trying to buy speed with less weight, time with less evidence. They will get neither. At 2:48 p.m., the flight deck reports green. The helicopter lifts cleanly from the deck and banks toward the intercept point, flying low over the water. From the air, the ocean becomes unforgiving. Every wake stands out. Every turn is exposed. Every move can be read in real time. Targeting data flows directly from the destroyer to the aircraft. Range, bearing, speed, constantly updated. This is not a chaotic pursuit. It is a controlled convergence. Below, the go-fast keeps running. Above, the helicopter closes quickly. And for the crew on that small boat, still throwing millions into the sea, one truth is becoming impossible to ignore. There is no shoreline ahead, there is no safe harbor behind them, and there is no escape route left untracked. What started as a routine patrol has crossed from observation into action, and the next phase is already underway. At 2:49 p.m. local time, the MH-60R Seahawk drops lower and picks up speed, its blades cutting into the dense Pacific air. From 200 feet above the surface, the ocean looks almost like a grid. Wakes, vectors, movement patterns. At this altitude, nothing stays hidden, especially not a boat running at full throttle. The aircraft's forward-looking infrared locks on almost immediately. Overheated engines glow brightly against the cooler water. On the display, the suspect vessel stands out in sharp contrast, a narrow hull bouncing across the swell as if it is barely touching the sea. Then the boat makes its move, a hard turn to port, then another to starboard, zigzagging aggressively to complicate the intercept. It is a familiar tactic. Force the aircraft to overshoot, create uncertainty, gain a few more seconds, and in open water, seconds can feel priceless. But this helicopter was not launched to posture. From the cabin door, the crew has full visibility. The door gunners track every movement while the sensors maintain a constant lock. The Seahawk is not just observing, it is recording everything, every course correction, every package dumped, every attempt to evade. The pilot brings the aircraft lower, skimming just above the wave tops. Rotor-wash kicks white spray into the air. The sound alone carries a message, a deep mechanical roar rolling across the water. You have been found. The aircraft makes its first pass abeam of the vessel, offset but unmistakably close. Over open frequencies, the warning goes out, calm and unmistakable. Unidentified vessel, you are operating in international waters. Stop immediately. There is no reply, no reduction in speed, no sign of compliance. Instead, more cargo goes overboard, this time faster, sloppier. One package slams into the hull on the way down and bursts open on impact. White powder flashes against the blue water. Even without a field test, the implication is obvious. The stakes just moved higher. From above, the Seahawk adjusts again, tightening the intercept and settling just off the vessel's stern quarter. Close enough that every man on board knows they are being watched. Close enough that their only remaining choice is to keep running straight. But straight is not going to save them. Back aboard the destroyer, CIC follows the sequence in real time. Range is closing. Speed difference is narrowing. The geometry favors the aircraft completely. The order from the bridge is exact. Escalate warnings. The Seahawk banks left and drops again. This time, the door gunner leans out, weapon aimed not at the crew, but at the water ahead of the bow. A short burst rips across the surface, striking several meters off the side of the boat. Tall columns of spray erupt instantly. The message is unmistakable. This is no training run. This is no longer surveillance. This is a lawful order to stop. The vessel still does not stop. Instead, it surges forward again, engines screaming, wake widening. The helmsman pushes every bit of power left in the motors. The hull visibly shudders under the strain. It is no longer a calculated decision. It is panic. Inside the helicopter, no one wastes words. They do not need to. The warning phase is over. The pilot swings the Seahawk around for another pass. Tighter now, lower, slower, closer. The stern fills the view. 3 exposed outboard engines, unarmored, vulnerable. On the destroyer, the commanding officer watches the live feed. The threshold has been met. Active evasion, refusal to comply, destruction of evidence, risk to navigation. Authorization is given for disabling fire, aimed at the engines. The helicopter slides into position. The gunner steadies. No hesitation, no excess, just precision. The burst is brief and controlled. Rounds strike the outboards. One throws sparks, another coughs and dies. Smoke rises from the stern as the boat lurches sharply to one side. Its speed falls off instantly. The wake collapses. Water closes around the hull. The chase is over. The Go Fast drifts dead in the water, smoke trailing behind it. Moments later, hands rise above the deck, high and empty. Overhead, the Seahawk holds its orbit in silence. No more warning shots, no more sudden movement. The vessel is stopped. For the first time since 2:45 p.m., the situation begins to de-escalate. Not because anyone offered mercy, but because control has been established. The next phase is not about speed or force. It is about boarding, evidence, and the law, and it begins quickly. At 3:01 p.m. local time, the suspect vessel sits motionless on the water, engines disabled, smoke thinning into the warm Pacific air. Above it, the Seahawk maintains a steady circle, sensors locked, cameras rolling. Nothing moves without being seen. Below, the crew of the Go Fast is no longer trying to flee. They kneel on deck with their hands raised, looking upward. The adrenaline that drove the escape has burned off. What remains is exposure. Out here, the open ocean offers no shadows. Along the port side of USS Sampson, 2 RHIBs hit the water and power away from the hull, accelerating toward the disabled craft. The transition is seamless, from air control to surface control, from tracking to custody. This is the point where the mission changes character. Weapons are still present, but they are no longer the center of attention. Authority now comes from procedure, training, and legal process. The RHIBs close fast, their wakes cutting white lines across the sea. A Coast Guard law enforcement detachment rides with the Navy boarding teams, fully equipped, clearly identified, and legally empowered. This handoff was built into the operation long before the helicopter ever lifted off. As the RHIBs pull alongside, commands are issued. Firm, calm, and bilingual. Keep your hands visible. Stay still. No sudden movement. The suspects comply immediately. No resistance, no hesitation. Two men, both appearing to be in their 30s, sunburned and exhausted, kneel on the slick fiberglass deck. No weapons are visible, none are necessary. What surrounds them is already enough. Floating nearby, rising and falling with the swell, are tightly wrapped bundles. Dozens of them, some intact, some torn open in the rush to dump them. Each one is photographed, marked, and logged the moment it is recovered. The boarding team moves with practiced efficiency. One sailor maintains overwatch. Another secures the suspects. A third begins the safety sweep of the vessel. The findings confirm everything. No flag, no registration, no radio, no life jackets, no navigation lights. This boat was never intended for a safe return. A field test kit is opened aboard the RHIB. A small sample is taken from one of the soaked bricks. White powder. The test strip changes color. Cocaine. The confirmation is immediate. By the time the report goes back to the destroyer, the count is already underway. 47 bales recovered from the water and the vessel itself. Roughly 3,400 pounds. Estimated wholesale value, $58 million. In the narcotics trade, that is not just a shipment. It is a major operational loss. The suspects are restrained and advised of their rights under maritime drug enforcement procedures. They say nothing. They do not need to. The evidence already says enough. Under international maritime law, a vessel without nationality, a stateless vessel, falls under U.S. jurisdiction when engaged in illicit activity on the high seas. No claim of registry, no compliance with lawful orders. The legal chain is clear. Authority transfers fully to the Coast Guard. The record is clean, documented, and captured from multiple platforms. There is nothing ambiguous about it. With the suspects secured, attention turns back to the boat. The damage is severe, engines torn up, hull cracked along the keel, fuel leaking into the water. No bilge pump, no anchor, no safe way to tow it for hundreds of miles across open ocean. It is not simply useless, it is dangerous. One rogue swell could turn it into drifting debris, the kind capable of damaging a freighter or sinking a smaller vessel. Leaving it behind is not an option. The boarding officer makes the assessment official. Vessel unseaworthy. Recommend controlled disposal. Aboard USS Sampson, the commanding officer receives the report and acknowledges it without delay. Log it. Prepare for scuttling. The seized narcotics are transferred, tagged, sealed, and placed into secure storage. The detainees are escorted below deck. Medical checks are completed. Procedures are followed exactly. What began at 2:45 p.m. as a single radar anomaly has now become a fully documented interdiction, with arrests made, contraband seized, and legal authority clearly established. But the operation is not finished. The ocean does not keep trophies, and before the day ends, the final chapter will be written, not with speed or force, but with calm, deliberate finality. By 3:45 p.m. local time, the suspect vessel rides low in the water near the destroyer's port quarter, held by a single recovery line. Up close, the damage looks even worse. Fiberglass is split along the keel. Engine mounts are twisted. A sheen of oil spreads slowly across the surface. This boat is no longer evidence in the practical sense. It is a liability. Out here, hundreds of miles from land, the sea punishes negligence. An abandoned hull can drift for days, even weeks, before striking something larger. A merchant ship, a fishing trawler, a tanker moving through the dark. Leaving it afloat would create a hazard long after the smugglers themselves are gone. The Coast Guard officer aboard the destroyer makes the formal call. Unseaworthy, unsafe to tow. Recommend controlled disposal at sea. There is no debate. This is not about spectacle. It is about maritime safety. Preparation begins at once. The boarding team removes anything reusable. Fuel cans come off. GPS mounts are detached. Loose gear is recovered. The deck is stripped down to bare fiberglass. Nothing remains aboard that does not need to be there. The recovered bales are already secured deep inside the ship. Each one has been logged, each one has been sealed. Chain of custody has been preserved from the recovery point to the evidence locker. That part of the mission is complete. Now comes the part no one celebrates. ARHIB returns carrying a small charge package. Simple, controlled, precise. It is not meant to create a dramatic blast. It is meant to open the hull below the waterline and let the sea do the rest. The charge is placed near the stern, where the structural damage is already worst. The timer is set. The line is checked one final time. Throughout it all, the Seahawk remains overhead, circling quietly. Cameras continue to record, not for theater, but for accountability. At 4:12 p.m., the bridge receives the final report. Area clear, ready to scuttle. The commanding officer looks out over the water and gives a calm acknowledgement. Proceed. The order is relayed. Detonate on mark. Mark. There is no dramatic fireball, no towering blast, just a muted thump, barely audible over the sound of the ship. Seconds later, seawater begins pouring through the breached hull. The boat tilts slightly, then harder. Air escapes beneath the deck in hollow gurgles. The stern goes first. The bow lifts briefly, exposing chipped paint and scarred fiberglass, the last visible trace of a run that ended badly. Then it slips beneath the surface. In less than a minute, the ocean closes over it completely. The water smooths. The oil sheen begins to spread and thin. No wreckage remains floating free. It is over. For the crew, the moment passes without ceremony. Watches resume. Logs are updated. Systems return to routine monitoring. The destroyer does not linger. This was never about destruction. It was about closure. What remains is the impact. $58 million in narcotics will never reach land. 2 traffickers will face prosecution. 1 smuggling route has been exposed, mapped, and disrupted. Somewhere ashore, a logistics chain has just broken without warning. And none of it required missiles. None of it required headlines. None of it required escalation beyond what the situation demanded. This is what disciplined maritime power looks like. A warship built to track submarines and intercept missiles shifted roles without hesitation, surveillance platform, command node, aviation base, and law enforcement support vessel, all in a single afternoon. By 4:30 p.m. local time, the ocean has returned to its natural state. Calm, vast, indifferent. Where the Go Fast once drifted, there is now only a faint disturbance fading into the surface. On radar, the contact is gone. The track is closed. For USS Sampson, the mission is not over, but it has changed again. Below deck, the 2 detainees sit quietly under guard. Medical checks are complete. Rights have been read, no statements are made, no resistance is offered, there is nothing left to bargain with. Out here, the facts are final. In secure storage, the 47 bales are counted again. Every package is weighed, sealed, and documented. The chain of custody remains airtight. From the point of recovery to future prosecution, every step is accounted for. This is the part most people never see. No sirens, no victory music, no shouting, just procedure. And procedure is what turns an interdiction into a conviction. The destroyer resumes its patrol route. Engines steady, sensors wide. Pacific Watch does not stop because one boat has been intercepted. It exists because there are many more routes like this, built on the assumption that the open ocean is too vast to control. That assumption is no longer safe. Pacific Watch is not random pursuit. It is a layered operation, intelligence, surveillance, and presence, working together to break smuggling corridors long before they ever approach a coastline. Ships like Sampson are not out here by accident. They are positioned deliberately, guided by patterns, data, and years of analysis. The smugglers never saw the net. They only felt it when it closed. For the crew, this mission was routine, not because it was easy, but because it was rehearsed. Every step followed doctrine refined over decades. Detect, identify, warn, escalate only when necessary. Apply force with restraint, transfer authority, document everything. No shortcuts. That discipline matters, especially in international waters, where every action can be examined later in courtrooms, diplomatic channels, or public narratives. That is why warnings are recorded, why force is controlled, why every decision is logged in real time. The goal is not intimidation, the goal is legitimacy. And legitimacy is one of the strongest deterrents at sea. Somewhere else in the Pacific, someone watching this corridor will take notice. Not because a boat was sent to the bottom, but because it was found. Because it was stopped cleanly. Because once the process began, there was no path left out. Cartel logistics depend on probability, on the belief that most runs get through, on the idea that enforcement is slow, scattered, or too far away to matter. But every interdiction like this changes that calculation. One lost shipment is not just lost money, it is broken trust, disrupted timing, compromised routes, reassigned crews, and reevaluated risk. And in that world, risk is everything. USS Sampson was built to hunt submarines and intercept missiles. On this day, it stopped a smuggling boat. Tomorrow, it could be called to do something entirely different. That flexibility is not accidental. It is doctrine. Modern naval operations demand ships that can move from combat roles to constabulary ones without losing effectiveness. This is what that looks like in real life. No missiles launched, no lives lost. $58 million removed from the pipeline. As the sun begins to sink toward the horizon, the destroyer stays on course. Watches rotate. CIC settles back into its steady rhythm. Another leg of the patrol begins. Out here, the ocean never announces what is coming next, but the Navy is already watching.